Yeah,
Here?
oh, they gave me the microphone, so.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
And what you were saying earlier in the response to that first question, I'm wondering if the arrow of evolution and convergence, as opposed to the struggle, other things that kind of get in the way, is that kind of like climate and weather?
Yes. So climate and weather do play a significant factor. I mean, in
No,
terms...
I mean just as images.
Oh, as images.
That we get.
Not so much in terms of a straight arrow, you mean?
No, I mean that I think we understand, we have come to understand, much to our chagrin, that a lot of people confuse climate and weather.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And it's very easy to fall into despair if you think what's happening right now has thrown that direction into non-existence. Really.
Right. And I think, if I could just add to that, I think my own practice is not to pay a lot of attention to a lot of the news feeds, because I think we are in this sensational news feed overload. And we're in an age of fake news. We can't tell what's fake news and what's real news anymore. And it's just, I don't know if it's really helpful. And I think I've often wondered sometimes if the news media is at the heart of the problem rather than trying to, inform us of the problems. And there's a fine line there. Teilhard had this notion of the noosphere, where we could be, in a sense, where technology could help unify us on the level of consciousness or mindfulness. And he thought the noosphere could in some way be the newsphere, but that newsphere is doing just the opposite. And I think we have to make a choice. I think it's good to be informed of what's going on in the world, but how much information is really necessary for us to evolve to a more fruitful way of life together? And I think we need to make some collective decisions with regard to how much attention we want to give to, CNN and Fox 5, if I can throw that out there, and whatever else news. I mean, I know there are some devotees, the first thing they do in the morning, and they wake up, besides checking their phone, is turn on the news, as if you might be missing something that happened within the last 6 to 8 hours. How do we pull back and gather ourselves in, you might say, as fields of creative processes that don't need to feed off all that news to be what we're becoming? And I think we need to make maybe need a new type of asceticism in the collectivity. And maybe a new type of, instead of turning on the news, how about we turn on the heart? How about we take what Matthew's saying here, and take time just to focus that brain of ours on what we desire in this moment, in this day. So, but your analogy is correct. We confuse things, and we take the bad news as the news. That's it. We're falling apart. It's all gonna end by next week. Let's have a party, and it's all downward. And what I see is a collective depression right across the Western Hemisphere, and certainly what's happening in Europe as well, populism in Europe as well. So we have a global collective depression, and I think this goes very well for patriarchy that says, see, you need us. You need male control from above. Look what's happening, So we know we have a power within. We have a power within us. We don't even know our own inner power, our own inner strength. We need to know it, and we need to rely on it, and we need to deepen it.
I like what you said, and the point about the new asceticism, to know when to pull the plug and get your space, which is what you need for some meditation and so forth. I have a phrase that I use, that we should not watch the news, but pray the news. And so can we bring a deeper presence to the news, so we're not just responding to all the reptilian brain energy there, which sells things, as you say, and burning buildings or burning hair on fire people and all the rest, that's extremely unuseful. Well, my point is, if you can pray, and by that I mean to go into the news looking for, first, via positiva. That is to say, is there awe and is there wonder in this news? I'll never forget, for example, when we first landed the little buggy on Mars. It was so much fun, this panel of scientists. They were all like children. It was so wonderful to see the childlike side of the scientist, which is the mystic. The mystic is the puer and the puella. You know, in our archetypal language, we don't call the Christ the sheep, we call Christ the Lamb of God. A lamb, you've ever been with a lamb when they're born? I was out in the moors of England teaching at Schumacher College once, and we went out for a break in March, and these little lambs jumping up on Mama, trying to get her to play. Oh, but Mama, she had seen it all. She was cynical, and she just was good. But the lambs jumping up and down, jumping up and down. That's the mystic in you. The mystic in you wants to play in the universe, and you have a right to play in the universe. So what play can we find on the news? What beauty? For example, you know, there's often a lot of beauty, and then there's the via negativa. You go into, yes, what about the sadness? What about the suffering? But you can only take so much.
It's true, but I have to say this. I mean, you know, the thing is, Discovery Channel or National Geographic or watching lovely things really doesn't grip us. You know, we're not really, the Touched by an Angel program lasted for a while, or, you know, God texted me or friended me or whatever. It's sweet, you know, but really what we love, Criminal Minds, Law and Order SVU, NCIS, we love where
You're telling us all about your personality
Totally.
and your channel choices. But that's okay.
You know, I'm like, I don't really want to watch flowers and, you know, taking a trip down the Rhine.
About that. No, I'm talking about watching the news and praying the news, not just the.
But I'm
the
fascinated by the fact that we are entertained by violence. That's what I find really fascinating.
That is really important.
And there's something about us that there's a darkness about us that it grips us. It takes us in, and we're pulled in. Actually, the violence is our violence. That's the capacity that we have for violence, and we have the capacity to solve these riddles. You know, the mystery of these things, the fact that human nature can be loving and can be so cruel. You know, that we can be in a relationship and then all of a sudden we can axe murder this same person, and then we have Olivia Benson solving the problem, and these things pull us in. They're like a gravity. I have to tell you that, I mean, because why? Because they're going season after season after season, right? You know, and the shows that are about, say, doing good in your neighborhood, or what the kids in your block are doing, they're like, they're not doing well. They're off the charts, and they're out within a month. So it's telling television, right? As Marshall McLuhan said years ago, the medium is the message. It's telling us something about us, and we need to pay attention to it. It's a mirror. And so we can't be, I think we have to be realistic of the fact that there's something deep and dark within us that's unresolved. There's an unresolved violence within us. And we need to come to terms with it.
Well, there's that. There's also sport. I think that sports, there's a different way to look at sports.
I'm a total sports fan,
and here's what I say about sports. That sports are really playing with the reptilian brain.
Love it.
When you think about it,
actually.
Because here, but it's with rules. You see, you can't go full reptiles because there are umpires and referees. So let's talk like basketball. Okay, for let's say 2 hours, 2 teams go at it. They want to win. It's the reptilian brain. We're playing with the reptilian brain because the reptilian brain wants to be number one. But it's a game, and everybody knows it's a game.
No,
but
it's more than a game.
But it's serious. Okay. Well, so you bet a lot. Okay, now we're learning more about you. But my point is this. To me, first of all tribes that I've ever heard of anyway have always had sports. And I think when I stand back from, of course, I happen to live in warrior country, so we have a real good team at this time in history, so I have something to talk about. But my point is this, no, really, it's genius on the part of our species. We did discover the reptilian brain. We didn't have a name for it. We got to win, but let's make it a game, see. Now, early in some of our cultures, it wasn't just a game. When you lost, you also lost your neck. So it was pretty darn serious. Now you just lose your money or your reputation or your job. But the point is, I think it's really genius on our species' part to play, not to beat up the reptilian brain and not just to calm it with meditation, and that's fine, but it's a new kind of meditation. Why don't we make a game out of this reptile? And for 2 hours, go at it, and then when it's over, everyone cheers. One side is happy for a day or two, and the other's sad for a day or two, and life goes on. So I do think that real sport, not sport to make billionaires richer, not sport that sells its soul, and so forth, but the real gift of athleticism, the hard work, the teamwork, the devotion, the smarts. I mean, all of it to me is extremely interesting, and that's how I understand it. That is a brilliant way, again, of playing with the reptilian brain. So meditation, we pet the reptile, but in games, in sport, we make a game of it for a couple hours and get over it.
I have a different view on sports, I have to tell you.
What does your bookie say?
Very briefly, I think sports and music are church. Basically, really. It's where people gather collectively as one. I mean, you have to go to a Villanova basketball game,
absolutely.
really.
Oh, Villanova. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking serious business here now. This is really, it's a unison. I mean, we all wear a habit. Everyone wears a Villanova shirt, a Villanova cap.
I'm trying to imagine you in that.
I've got the whole kit and caboodle. There's something, so.
It's ritual, absolutely.
It's ritual.
Yeah.
There's something about us. We're made for ritual,
Yeah.
And there's something about competition that is, there's healthy competition and there's unhealthy competition. And I think, I really do think we have a great team, Villanova. And
I think I do too with the Warriors.
But we also know, how to lose graciously. Meaning, we'll be back to kill you, really, next time.
No, well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Turning the reptile into a gentleman or a gentlewoman,
We
with
won't say
class.
this, but we should open it up to more questions here, because we can.
Yes. Oh, excuse me.
Yes, over here, or there, or there you are. Hello.
I have a cosmos question and a spiritual question.
Okay.
The cosmos question is, are the number of atoms in the universe fixed as what resulted from the Big Bang? Or do atoms get recycled as we die? Or how's that all work? And my second question is, what happens to your spirit when you die?
I would take the second question first. I think I might be better with that one. I'm not too sure about the first question. I don't have the facts on that. My view, and I'm sure Matt will have his own view. So spirit, what is spirit? That is a really interesting question, right? Because we're talking about spirituality. We're talking about the soul, the spiritual dimension of us that's that immutable, immortal dimension. Spirit to me is energy. Core, and I think what we're talking about is core energy. The way I interpret resurrection is that we're resurrecting all the time in and through our relationships, right? Every time we, in a sense, are in relationship, we share our lives, the energy of our life, our core personality is, in a sense, taken up by another life, and there's something about us that lives on in others. So our spiritual energy, I think, endures in terms of personality in the cosmos. And I think it's in terms of remembering that there's something about us that to the degree that we share the core energies of our lives with others, we are remembered. We are membered to others, those who continue on after us. And therefore, we live on in this universe in a new way, in and through a new collective whole. So,
I have a friend who's, by the way, I think Einstein says that no energy is lost in the universe. Hildegard of Bingen said no warmth is lost in the universe. And what I say is no beauty is lost in the universe. It goes someplace. And And I have a friend who's not at all religious. He's Chinese by background, but he was raised no religion. He's not New Age or anything. He works with his hands. He's a blue-collar worker. He builds homes and things. And when his mother died, 3 months later, she showed up at the foot of his bed. And they had a conversation. And she said things to him like, remember the values I taught you, etc. And every time he tells me the story, his eyes well up with tears. And so I ask in crowds like this, how many of you have had an experience like this? Personally, raise your hand if you have. Or shut your eyes, because this isn't a contest. So just people raise their hands who's have an experience like that. Well, it looks like about 50% or so. And then keep your eyes shut. Raise your hand if you have a friend or someone you trust who's not kooky, who's had an experience like that, who's shared an experience like that with you. Oh, wow. That's about 98%. Very interesting. Well, to me, this is exactly what the resurrection stories are about in the Gospels. And I think, as much as I respect the work of the Jesus Seminar and all these people who wisely carried the historical Jesus quest to its culmination in our lifetime, and they tell us that, this percent, 15 or 20% of the words ascribed to Jesus are really his, the others come from the community, that's cool too. But I think they've been far too vigorous with their scissors around the resurrection stories. They just want to cut it all out because it's not modern consciousness to have someone reappear like that. But I think they're ridiculous. This is where experience comes in. We just took, I don't know if this is a scientific poll, but it's a poll of 500 human beings who aren't out of their minds, who have heard stories like this. So why, if it can happen in Winter Park, Florida in 2019, couldn't it have happened in Jerusalem in the first century? So to me, I think that what happens after we die, first of all, no one really knows. No one's come back fully to give us the details. But to me, so much in life does not die. And I know when my friend Buck Gostos, a Lakota leader, a beautiful man, when he died, his funeral was the most powerful funeral I've ever been at in my life. It had to be outdoors. If it was held indoors, all the stained glass would have broken. But at one point, after a lot of certain ceremonies, this fellow comes up with 2 paper bags in his hand. I said, well, what is this? He pulls out of one paper bag the jacket that Buck used to wear. And up till now, there's been absolutely no sign of emotion. The elders have spoken and so forth. I was asked to speak as an elder and so forth. But now, he holds up the jacket. See this jacket? Remember Buck in this jacket? He'll never be in this jacket again. So let him go. He's going to another place. Let him go. And then everyone roars, this amazing roar of grief. The first level of grief is anger. And they roared this roar. Pulls out his coffee cup. Buck always had a coffee cup. See this? You'll never see him with the coffee cup. So let him go. And the one, it was a mantra, one example after another. But it was so powerful that Buck is on a journey, and he's leaving us as we knew him. It doesn't mean he won't come back again in some form, but let him go on this new journey. And that's what's so important, to realize that there's so many more layers. We talk about, 3 and 4, was it degrees? No, dimensions. But there's so many dimensions. Here's one. I'll be quick, but here. David Paladin, I spoke about him the other day, this Navajo artist. I didn't tell you the whole story, that he was tortured in a Nazi camp during the war for years. He was the only Native American in the camp. It was a concentration camp, not a GI camp. For example, they nailed his foot to the floor one Christmas and made him twirl for 24 hours. When the Americans liberated the camp after 4 years, they found his body at the bottom of a pile of dead bodies. He weighed 65 pounds. He was comatose and paraplegic. They took him back to his reservation, where it took him 2 years to come out of his coma. And when he did, the elders said, well, you have a choice. You can go to the Veterans Hospital the rest of your life. You'll live in a wheelchair because you're paraplegic, or we'll try to heal you in the ancient ways. So let's try those ancient ways. They took him to an ice-cold river, this paraplegic, and threw him in over his head. He said when he hit the water, he was more angry at his elders than he was at the Nazis. But it worked. He walked after that. He took several pilgrimages by foot to Mexico and back. And he had an amazing life as an artist and so forth. But after he died, his wife called me. I guess he had read my books, especially Original Blessing, and he loved how it brought his indigenous and Christian culture together for him. So she wanted me to do a commentary on an art exhibit of his work that she was doing. And then I went to meet her in the house where they lived. And she told me this amazing story. She said, well, often dead poets would come and dictate paintings to my husband. I said, really? She said, and then she left the room. And she came back with a painting in her hand. And from across the room, I knew it was Paul Klee. And sure enough, she came up and Paul Klee was written on it. She said, I remember the night when my husband was visited by Paul Klee, who dictated this painting. Now this guy was a shaman. His elders told him toward the end of his life that your suffering as a young man was to initiate you as a shaman. And of course, shamans live in two worlds at once. And the Celtic people are very aware of this kind of reality too. So there is another world. There are other worlds. And I think that story is so much more interesting than these detective movies on TV, you know. which always get tied up with a bow after the last commercial. You know, they only have 56 minutes or whatever it is. But my point is, life is so damn interesting. And whoever told us that dead artists are eager to come back and dictate to you, or someone else? So, you know, I just think our species is filled with stories that are marvelous about how this is not the only incarnation that you are going to have.